you're crunching up a right there.
It doesn't like the graphics.
No, it's
that's
the crossing question. That's a TNT.
Okay, smash. Okay, I got my citizenship today. I'm ready.
All right, ready?
Just a second. Oh, okay, I'm good.
The ranks at the top proves why the counterplan solves this advantage better. It's all about free trade congressional legislation. Only counterplan ensures that legislation will not be struck down by the Supreme Court on other grounds. This indicates that we need to hold the Supreme Court accountable to see how we do extend the 1C1, the civil remedy, and believes for bad notion of citizenship. Our evidence answers their economic citizenship distinction indicates that they base citizenship on the notion of the animus requirement, which recreates the public-private dichotomy because only violence in a public setting is considered acceptable. 1 and C2 that they tie citizenship to economic means this is uniquely disastrous because it means that citizens only have a value if they're considered economically productive, which means it recreates the role of women as only reproductive agents, and that they're only worth the means that the people most vulnerable are uniquely left out of the notion of citizenship. People of color without a job are considered unworthy to be considered as citizens, which answers the only real argument, which is their economic, non-economic distinction. They uniquely tie citizenship to this notion, which is disastrous. Also, the citizen of the civil remedy perpetuates the exclusion of so-called private gender violence, crazy 93. The animus requirement ensures private gender profession follows that civil security and focus on women reason of their sex, and judicial remedy has had the effect of striking the citizen harms count depending on citizens' sexual violence apparently by others to panels to extend the 1 and C3 and 4 that their notion of citizenship is radically exclusive. It denies personhood to those who are not considered worthy of entering the citizenship. Even if they're right that they're not unique, it proves that they have no capacity to solve the advantage because people will always left out, and they uniquely obscure those people by assuming that their notion of citizenship is sufficiently inclusive. This enhances a conservative politics, and our evidence is that even if they do expand it, even if they're capable of expanding it to immigrants, people will be unable to actually recognize those rights in practice because of the other constraints on them exercising full citizenship. They still exclude those people. They make a uniqueness argument. I've already explained how they uniquely entrench the ties with the animus and productivity explained above. Also, citizenship, even if productive, results in forced homogenization and the eradication of difference. Young and non-exclusion or extended or considered the universal citizenship, the inclusion of formally excluded the definition. Citizenship imposes homogeneity. This suppresses group difference in the public and private force. Excluded groups to be measured by privilege and groups and critics of intergroup levels when we call for new public life do not intend to exclude the emphasis by such participatory difference and commonest those threatens to suppress differences. Citizenship by no means exhausts identity, but takes moral priority for all social activities. Particular groups must take place within a framework of community established by the public government. They touch reality and identity of universal citizenship will disadvantage groups even when they have citizenship status. The idea of the public is universal makes homogeneity a requirement. Assisting citizens adopts their only to reinforce the privileged interest. The privilege will dominate the unified public, marginalizing or silencing those of other groups. Civil remedy. They say at the top that they control uniqueness. This links to the 1AC. The idea that there's gender violence in the status quo, so who cares? We make it worse is precisely what allows society to ignore gender violence in the first place. Obviously, gender violence can get worse as a result of your plan. The question is which more effectively accesses your gender violence advantage, the plan or the states and the status quo do not have an animus requirement. They say that they immediately solve either Johnson evidence. This is totally naive and it proves the link to a reason evidence. There are assumptions that they can wish away all violence in society just by changing the language of the Supreme Court without actually making material conditions any better for the women who are victims of gendered violence. Only provides comfort factoring and exacerbates the plight of people after except for 1 and C1 alternate causality. They do not solve a gender violence society. The court will still be evil. They will just not roll back on find other grounds to roll back to societal gender arguments. The plan does not lead to things like wage equality, which will prevent them from accessing their gender impacts. Extend the 1 and C2 and 3 are states term. The states solve the entirety of the case without the animus requirements. Like a status quo states counterplan. All 50 states already have these requirements, but they do not have the animus requirement. Our evidence below indicates is uniquely disastrous. Even if they don't solve the language of the Morrison decision, they have the best solvency for material conditions, which is the best hope of people actually deterring gender violence in the future. Also, the plan gives states an incentive to bug pass, increasing discrimination levy. One federal courts will never be the answer for most tiny fraction of millions who are victimized each year by violent crimes in the state. Do anything is U.S. is responsibility at the state level. The last thing we need to get state officials an excuse to pass the buck and say this is a federal civil rights issue. We're not doing anything because the DOJ will look at it. Also, extend the Roseman and Weber evidence. States allow tort remedies without relying on an animus requirement. Political accountability ensures that every state will respond to gender violence. Only the plan was a trade-off. Hagan won the state's response to domestic violence reference the first step in combating gender violence and improving the lives of significant nationwide state legislation and taking steps to address the aggressive legislation of the present gender violence. Public acknowledgement that domestic violence evidence created a situation where state politics cannot afford to ignore the need for legislation unless the risk being voted out of office. Public accountability encouraging anti-violence legislation across the country needed for women to feel protected by the state. Every state has an active civil protection. Other statutes provide for emergency incredibly for victims of technically abuse of the protection protection statute also provides support for the victim to return to regain control of her life, and states are responding now. This is more responsive than civil remedy. Reagan, Henry, and tyrannical means to put distance between themselves and their visas and jobs. States are taking on the legal weapon violence and abuse women's disposal. Like state governments are so powerful, the general provisions of the CR failed comparison legislative controversy. They have to realize the South California that the CR placing terror burden on abused women are not the answer. Also, our Jaffe evidence proves that they also uniquely trade off with state remedies by making it into a federal issue, undermine the effectiveness of federal enforcement. This answers the uniqueness arguments. 1 and 2, 4 through 6, the crazed rapist argument. There is almost no ink here in the 2AC. They've conceded that their notion of the crazed rapist leads to all state war and violence. There's our Fenton evidence and our Hirsch evidence indicates that the deterrents outweigh the case. This is a comparative evidence because these legal stereotypes will enable violence to continue, which means every time they say the court is evil, or keep in mind they are simply reinverting the way that the court is evil. And the civil they make an argument about criminal definitions, but the civil remedy is based on the criminal definitions of violence. They simply rely on that as well as 92 of the state had 3 adopts a very different labor evidence from that remedy. The state committee specifically refers the court as praised down with the language of section 168 is reminiscent of language on the state record statutes, and the civil remedy perpetuates the worst aspects of criminal laws that depends on state criminal laws. Phrasing 93, the right to from crimes of violence section 302D defines a crime of violence, so that would constitute a felony. The violence crimes of violence victim to prove what occurred, which then met so criminal standards extend. The CRR exacerbates abuse. Our Reagan evidence proves that they only provide comfort for acting without improving material conditions. They say change the language. There's no guarantee the Supreme Court will not continue to oppress women. The fact that this was before Morrison is irrelevant to the fact that they don't actually make things better. Extend the force requirement is also net better for the state's argument. Our phrasing evidence is that it reinverts archaic notions of state by relying on the idea that force must be used in order for gender violence to be bad. Also, extend the CRR does not effectively deter. Gender violence is far more complicated than they recognize. Their Johnson evidence relies on a simplistic understanding of domination. Most people who beat or rape their wives have never even heard of the civil remedy or the Morrison decision. And the idea that the plan would deter gendered violence throughout society is totally ridiculous and obscures the complexity of violence.
726. Mike, you can take a couple seconds.